The Bengals are just months removed from narrowly losing in the Super Bowl to the Rams, and while it was a disappointing ending, it came with one huge positive. Nobody expected Cincinnati to even be there, but they were. The Bengals have proven that they are one of the best teams in the NFL, and now it's time for them to put together another run, and this time, maybe walk away with a ring. When you think playoff success, you surely don't think of the Bengals. From 1990 to 2021, Cincinnati won a grand total of 0 playoff games. The Bengals straight up sucked for decades, but that all ended after the Bengals were terrible in 2019, making them the worst team in football, bad enough to get them the first overall pick. Everyone knows that a team's success starts and ends with the quarterback, and the Bengals have their guy for the future, Joe Burrow. Joe Shiesty has been a man on a mission and done everything Cincinnati has asked him to since he went first overall at the 2020 NFL Draft. In his final season in college, Burrow not only won the Heisman Trophy, but also led LSU to a national championship. His rookie year in the pros had good moments, but ultimately ended prematurely when he went down with a torn ACL and MCL. On the year, Burrow threw for 2,688 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. Trust me, the Bengals were still ass, and the grass wasn't exactly green in Cincy, but that was all about to change. In 2021, Burrow went 10-6 starting while throwing for 4,611 yards, 34 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. He even led the league in completion percentage and yards per completion on his way to winning Comeback Player of the Year. Cincy ended up making the playoffs, and, well, you know exactly what happened next. The Bengals got hot and went on a run, and eventually landed in the Super Bowl before falling to the Rams. Now, if there was one bad thing to look at in 2021, it was that horrendous offensive line. The Bengals got sacked 51 times in the regular season, the most in the NFL, and then got sacked 19 times in the postseason, an NFL record. Cincinnati knew they needed offensive line help at the 2021 NFL Draft, but opted not to take a lineman at 5, instead drafting Jamar Chase. Chase was reunited with his college quarterback, who together, again, they won a national championship, and Chase was a big part of Burrow's Heisman campaign. Plus, he was a consensus All-American. Yeah, the pick was criticized, and it seemed like everybody thought the Bengals should have gone after an offensive lineman. I mean, honestly, myself included, but it's safe to say that they shut everybody up after what they pulled last year. Chase went on to record 266 yards in a single game, and then 1,455 yards on the year, both of which are NFL rookie records. Add that to 13 touchdowns off 81 receptions, and you get an Offensive Rookie of the Year, a second-team All-Pro selection, and make the Pro Bowl. He only continued his tear in the postseason, recording 368 receiving yards, the most by a rookie in NFL history. Safe to say, he's an absolute menace, and on the way to becoming a superstar. And honestly, he's probably already there. But the Bengals have even more studs than just Chase, like T. Higgins. In the same draft the Bengals snagged Burrow with the first pick, they used the first pick in the second round on T. Higgins, who, like Burrow, won a natty in college. Higgins did it in 2019 alongside Trevor Lawrence, though. Higgins was a second-team All-ACC selection and even returned back to the national championship the next season, but you guessed it, lost to Burrow and Chase. You know what? I wonder if that's ever come up in conversation between the three of them in the locker room. But back to the point. Even as a rookie, Higgins was a straight-up reliable wideout. He had over 900 yards and 6 touchdowns before seeing improvements last season, going for nearly 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. He very well may be the most underrated wide receiver in the league, and yet somehow the guy behind him on the depth chart might just be even more underrated, Tyler Boyd. Like Higgins, Boyd was a second-round guy, although he is a bit older, taken back in the 2016 NFL Draft. Boyd actually had a 1,000-yard season in only 14 games back in 2018, which is pretty damn impressive considering he had Andy Dalton and Jeff Driscoll throwing him the ball. He even went for over 1,000 yards again the following year. Last year, despite literally getting buried behind Chase and Higgins, 2 absolute studs by the way, Boyd still had 800 yards and 5 touchdowns. How many number 3 wide receivers can you name that get over 800 yards? Yeah, the Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver core is fucking crazy. And that's exactly why they made the Super Bowl last year. Not drafting an offensive lineman was no doubt the right move, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't need to be fixed. The Bengals are well aware that their offensive line is, well, shit. The entire league knows it's bad. So Cincinnati went out and got one of the best linemen on the market, La'el Collins. They gave him a nice 3-year, $21 million deal, and he definitely deserves it. Collins was a beast in Dallas and started every single season for them and was reliable as hell. He was a key member on that Cowboys offensive line that was considered the best in football for a few years there. And while, yes, Burrow gets a lot of benefit from Collins, Joe Mixon's life gets a hell of a lot easier too. For one, Joe Mixon is one of the most underrated backs in the league, and you can't tell me otherwise. If you watched him at all last year, the dude had to sprint around the line of scrimmage before he could even get room to run. Plus, nobody cuts better than Mixon. Like Higgins and Boyd, Mixon was drafted by the Bengals in the 2nd round. Clearly, they've had a lot of success there. He really broke out in his 2nd year in the pros, rushing for over 1,100 yards, and then he turned around and did it again in 2019. Mixon was hurt for most of 2020, but is now coming off the best season of his career, 1,205 yards and 13 touchdowns, plus 314 yards and 3 touchdowns through the air, all career highs. And he was named to his first Pro Bowl. Mixon is just another beast on an already damn good Bengals offense. One of the biggest differences between the 2020 Bengals and the 2021 Bengals was the addition of Trey Hendrickson, who was signed to a 4-year, $60 million deal in the offseason. He spent the first 4 years of his career in New Orleans, but really broke out in 2020 with 13.5 sacks. That earned him a pretty new contract from the Bengals, and last year, he even improved. Hendrickson had 14 sacks and then racked in another 3.5 sacks in the postseason. He's really the guy to look at on the line, but Jessie Bates is the one to look at in the secondary. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before, but the Bengals actually used a 2nd-round pick to find a really good player in Jessie Bates. He was consistent as hell over the first 3 years of his career, recording over 100 tackles and exactly 3 interceptions in each season. Last year, he had 2 picks in the postseason, and oh yeah, one came off of Matthew Stafford in the Super Bowl. Bates has turned into one of the league's better safeties, and after he and the Bengals couldn't find a deal this offseason, he got franchise tagged. It's safe to say that the Bengals are in a really good position for the future, and it's clear that there is a lot of talent all around the roster. But some credit does need to go to the head coach, Zac Taylor. Remember when all the NFL teams were scrambling to chase after the next Sean McVay? Well, that's exactly what the Bengals did too. They went and hired McVay's quarterbacks coach, Zac Taylor, and it didn't go that great. The Bengals only won 6 games in total over his first 2 years in Cincy. Now, obviously that turned around for Taylor and the Bengals because months ago, Zac Taylor had to shake Sean McVay's hand in the Super Bowl. McVay had been there before in 2018, losing to the Patriots. This past season was his redemption to finally get to that ultimate goal, winning a Super Bowl. Taylor just lost his first trip there as a head coach, and now it's time for him and the Bengals to start building towards their redemption tour, because at the end of the day, Cincinnati was good enough to make it last season, and now they're even better.